My name is Eirini Botsari, and I'm the community manager of the OSCR, which stands for Open Science Community Rotterdam. OSCR welcomes academics and support staff working at Erasmus University and Erasmus Medical Center. We discuss, promote, and adapt open and transparent scientific practices at every stage of the research cycle, from the initial idea to the final product. Most of you are acquainted with OSCR, and some of you are members of this community. I would like to take this chance and thank you for your interest and support. In case you're not a member of our community and want to become one, you can always email me, and I will provide you with all the necessary information and instructions on how to join our growing community. I will attach my email address in the chat. We organize journal clubs, talks on various topics related to open science, reproducibility, and workshops. Today is a workshop day, and Antonio Schettino will guide us through on how to use the open science framework, managing, documenting, and sharing all the products of your workflow, from the pre-registration of the initial idea to the preprint of the final product. Soon, the pilot of Open Science Framework at Erasmus University will take place. I encourage whoever is interested and willing to be part of the pilot group to send me an email so that I can include you to the list. Before we dive into the workshop and give the floor to Antonio, I would like to give a warm welcome and a small introduction to him. Many of you know him since he is hard to miss. Antonio is involved and active in open science practices from the beginning of time. He has a background in experimental psychology and affective neurophysiology. He works as an independent researcher, being involved in analysis of research data. He is a senior advisor Open Science at Erasmus Research Services and the founder of the Open Science Community Rotterdam. He develops educational and training material for students, researchers, and support staff, advises and supports researchers on how to best highlight commitment to open science, and many more, as he does not stick to only one specific route. Before we begin, as a general reminder to our participants, I would like to point out one last time the rules of this meeting. If possible, please wear headphones. Video is optional. Pay attention to the moderator, and that is me. If you have questions, you can click on the raise hand button, and then I will unmute you. Otherwise, write down your question in the chat and I will read it. Follow the OSCR code of conduct, which I will also post in the chat. As you can see, we want to record this session with an intention to soon share it on our channel. I hope this will be okay with you and will not hold you back from asking questions and engaging in the discussion. That is from my part. Now, Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. I'm going to try and share my screen, which should be working. And we'll also make sure to see the chat. Yes, so in case there are some questions in the chat, either Eirini can help me out there, or I can read them myself. But now we can start. You should be able to see the full presentation in full screen. Okay. So thank you. This is not the first time that I give an introduction to the Open Science Framework. Some of you have already participated in previous workshops. For example, last year as part of the ROAR program that we had together with the Rotterdam Riots Club. If you are part of the Erasmus Graduate School for Social Sciences and Humanities, you might have already followed the professional skills course, but today it's a bit like more general for more people. So I was thinking of getting to know each other, but considering that we are not many here, perhaps we can just, and that basically we know each other already. Maybe we can just skip this part, and then we can go. Start a bit more quickly with a hands-on session, which I think is why most of you are here. Before doing that, I would like to introduce the Center for Open Science and the Open Science Framework, what these things are and why the Open Science Framework might be useful for a researcher working in several disciplines. And then the biggest part of the workshop will be a hands-on session in which I will just guide you through how to create a new project and do like basic things that you would normally want to do when you start a project on the OSF. A disclaimer is extremely important. This overview is inspired by webinars that I followed and workshops that I attended, even physical workshops. The first time that I was introduced to that I followed a workshop on the OSF was in 2016 at Ghent University. I still remember that. But these are all webinars and workshops organized by the Center for Open Science. My perspective is the perspective of an experienced end user. I'm not a developer, so it's highly likely that there are some things that I don't know. There are some things that might be changing. So I would like to give you some additional resources in case you don't find the information that you're looking for. There are official OSF guides that you can find. And by the way, these slides are shared on the Open Science Framework. Every time you see something green, it's a hyperlink. You can click and you'll be redirected to the resource. If you are in need of tech support, then you can email support@osf.io. And also for general questions and comments, they have contact@osf.io. They are extremely responsive. And even when it comes to, considering some additional features or bringing back some old features, they really listen, and then they really evaluate whether it's something that could be useful for more people. Now, a brief introduction to the Center for Open Science and the Open Science Framework. The first thing that we should talk about is the Center for Open Science, which is a nonprofit organization based in the United States, whose mission is to increase openness, integrity, and reproducibility of research. They are involved in many different areas. Infrastructure was, I believe, the first thing that they focused on, because they built the Open Science Framework. They developed the Open Science Framework. They still maintain it to this day. And the idea was to build the necessary tools to enable behavioral change. Then they focus on training, not only training related to on how to use the Open Science Framework, but also more general training on open and transparent practices. They have they foster a growing community, an ever-growing community of like-minded people. They are very much involved in policy. So, for example, some of you might be familiar with the Transparency and Openness Promotion Guidelines, which were developed in 2014, 2015. And some of the people involved in the development of these policies were part of the Center for Open Science. Last but not least, they are involved in meta science. They generate knowledge. They do research on research on researchers. So it's a multifaceted nonprofit organization. But of course, the most important thing that we are going to discuss today is their infrastructure, which is the Open Science Framework, which is a system that helps researchers manage, document, and optionally share research output and workflow. So I say optionally because the system is built with the idea of sharing, but by default, everything is private. So don't think that every time you put something on the Open Science Framework, you'll be immediately public. That's not the case. Everything starts by being private. The platform is free. It is open source. So if you click on this link, you'll be redirected to GitHub, where you can find the source code. And it is I would consider it discipline agnostic, in the sense that, yes, it was developed with the idea of initially solve some problems associated, some problems in psychology and social sciences, but its modular structure makes it really easy also for other disciplines to adopt the format. And of course, in case you don't know it, the link is osf.io. Also easy to remember. If we consider like a simplified version of the research life cycle, we can think of like starting it from searching the literature and discovering a niche that you might be interested in investigating, up until publication of the final report. It can be an academic paper, it can be a book, and so on. So each of these phases of the research life cycle are associated with also the use of some tools, right? For example, when you look for bibliographic references, you might be using reference managers like Zotero or Mendeley. When it comes to pre-registration, so when the idea is developed and then, before collecting data, researchers can write a sort of document that describes how, like a bit of the plan related to the particular project. The OSF registries are a wonderful place where you can upload this timestamp document that says, that specifies what researchers would like to do in their project. When it comes to online data collection, there are some usually open source experiment builders that interface very nicely. For example, here there is a PsychoPy or Open Sesame. And then when it comes to data storage, I think is where the Open Science Framework really shines. It was initially probably made with the idea of helping researchers share data, so data storage was particularly important. And so here you can see that the Open Science Framework interfaces seamlessly with services that are used very often in academic environments, from Google Docs to Dropbox to Figshare and so on. When it comes to the analysis code, for people who use R, there is a package that directly interfaces with the Open Science Framework. It's called OSFR. So in theory, somebody could, take some information and push it directly to the Open Science Framework. But you can also connect other services that also allow you to do some version control. For example, GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket. When it comes to writing the report, I would say in the majority of cases, I see people still, like sending each other emails with attached doc files. But there are other ways, and I think I see more and more researchers using Google Docs or some other collaborative writing platforms. And these platforms interface very well with the Open Science Framework as well. And then when it comes to the publication of the report, especially when we talk about preprints, there is so the OSF is the infrastructure that hosts preprint servers for several disciplines. For example, SciArchive for psychology and SocArchive for sociology. So as you can see here, it seems as if the Open Science Framework is built with this idea of collecting in one place all the products of the research workflow, which I think is extremely convenient. And that's, I think, the main strength of the Open Science Framework that I would say, as far as I know, no other service has. And that's why I promote it so often, despite the fact that I'm not paid by the Center for Open Science. I'm not an ambassador or anything, but it's just a very good service. So let's start with the hands-on session. Oh, Joanna, you have a question?
Yes, I had a question because now I was thinking that when researchers can pre-register like the research plan there, but it's also about the preprints at the end. So it's possible for both of them that they get feedback from community, right? They can get a feedback on both of them.
Yes, in theory, yes.
Okay. So do you know if, for instance, if I would upload there my research plan as a researcher, like do other users of Open Science Framework, do they get like a notification or how? Yeah, I just think like, okay, if I can get the feedback there as a researcher, how other people know that they are like, because I can imagine it's hardly ever happens that somebody goes, okay, let me give feedback on somebody's research today.
Yeah.
No, they have to be informed about it. So
yes.
Do you know if it's like included in any newsletter or their notification, or do you know anything about that?
I don't think it would be feasible to do something like this because the number of, for example, pre-registrations or preprints that are uploaded every day, I think is like too high. So I think right now what people do is so there is, for example, on Twitter, either people do it themselves. They say, hey, we just posted this preprint. Or very rarely, as far as I know, they say, we just uploaded this pre-registration, please give us feedback. This, I don't see it very often, but the preprint, yes, it happens all the time. And there is also a bot, or like a series of bots that are linked to the to each preprint server. So very often you can follow the bot on Twitter, and then you will get notifications every time something is pushed. But it is not something that, as far as I know, is built in the OSF itself.
Okay.
You have to be on Twitter, basically.
Clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's start with the fun part. So the first thing that I would like you to look at is a prototypical, I don't know if it's a prototypical because, yeah, I've been using it for too long, but like what you would expect an experienced user of the OSF to display on their profile page. So I'm using my page, not because I think it's a fantastic page or anything, but it's just because if there are any mistakes, there are any errors, it's my responsibility, and I can fix it myself. So here, for example, you can see every every registered user on the Open Science Framework has a profile page. And then this is populated with whatever you want to populate it with, right? So what you see on the right side is a series of links to, for example, personal websites, ORCID records, Twitter, and stuff like that. This is something that is not automatically populated. This is something that you can choose, that you can put manually, so you can choose what to put in, right? Which I think is an advantage because some people might not want to, to have everything displayed all at once automatically. But what you can also see, is the date in which I started, using the Open Science Framework, so the date of registration. This was quite some time ago. The direct link to the public profile. And then here, there are activity points that to this day, I have no idea what they mean and how they're calculated, and I ignore them all the time. And I don't think they mean anything, but I'm very happy to be proven wrong. And here you see also how many projects I have in total and how many of them are public. Because as I said earlier, not everything is automatically made public. This is something that you do, that you decide together with your collaborators whenever you are ready. And then if you look down here, you can see public projects on the left side and public components on the right side. This is a perfect moment for me to tell you the difference between a project and a component. And I usually use like a very simple analogy. A project is a very big box in which you can put very small boxes, which are the components. Okay, so think of it as sort of like a matryoshka kind of thing, and that's why I always consider this modular approach as very flexible, so people can do whatever they want with it. So what you see, for example, when it comes to public projects, here there are a few things that I've been involved in, and these are like the main projects themselves that might include other subcomponents. And then you have public components, which are smaller bits, smaller boxes inside bigger projects. This also means that you can share some components within a project and not others, which can be very handy. So imagine that data are not ready to be shared, but the code is ready to be shared. Then you can start by sharing the code, the component that contains the code, and not the component that contains the data. So again, when it comes to the flexibility, also refers to how easily you can share whatever you put on the OSF. Then we can look at, again, I'm not saying that this is a perfect OSF project. It's just something that I contributed to. But like how a fully formed project would look like. Okay, so this is a project that was completed in 2018. So starting in 2017 and was completed in 2018. And what you can see here is, for example, well, there is a title, obviously, and you can have it more or less, long or detailed. What you can see here on top is institutional affiliations. So here you see Ghent University, where I used to work and where this project was carried out, but also IGDOR, because I'm part of this independent research institute as an independent researcher. And for example, let's say that you want to click on Universiteit Ghent. I'm just going to open a new page. You will see here that Ghent University has what it's called an OSF institution account, and this is the landing page of their of Ghent University. And here you can see all public projects that are connected or affiliated with Ghent University. I'm saying this because it is a wonderful way to showcase the hard work of any researcher who puts something online and curates it so that it can be reused. And as Eirini mentioned at the beginning, this is something that we will also have at Erasmus University. We're almost there. It's almost ready, but this is something that will also include some guidelines and some more information on how to use the Open Science Framework at its best. Now, let me close this and let me go back to the project that I was talking about before. You can see there are contributors. So if you see the blue, so if there are hyperlinks, this means that these people have an OSF account. If the name is in black, it means that they don't have an account, but it doesn't matter for the accessibility of the data, because even people who do not have an account can still contribute to an OSF project. Then the affiliated institutions, as I mentioned earlier, when the project was created first and when it was updated last. The identifier, so this is a digital object identifier, which makes it very, very easy to cite also in other publications the work that is being shared on the OSF. This is very important because this is, like when people share code, share materials, share data, it is important that they get the recognition that is well deserved, because it's a lot of work. It needs to be well curated. You need to know what you're doing. And then here there's a description. You can put whatever you want. Here we put a link to the final publication. Then a license. This is a very important part of any project and any submission, because without a license, the default, at least as far as I know, when it comes to copyright law, I'm not a lawyer, but I've read a little bit about this, and the default is that people are not allowed to reuse or to do anything with the information that is on the OSF if there is no license. So it is important. So it defeats a bit the purpose if you put something publicly and it's publicly available. You've done all the hard work, and then legally nobody can use it. So just we will go a little bit through these licenses later on so I'll give you an idea of what you can do. And then you can see that here there is a message saying has supplemental materials for, and this is a preprint. So it's a preprint that is basically the same in terms of content to the final paper that you can access here. So you can connect, as I said earlier, the preprint with the information that you upload here on this project. I think you can do the same. So when we did this, I don't think it was possible, but now it's a bit more straightforward to do the same with the pre-registration. So I can't show you that example because I don't have it here with me, but it will be possible also to have something similar for your pre-registration. So that, as I said earlier, you have everything in one place. And then there is a wiki that can, be used as a sort of README file to put some information. And then you can see here the actual data. And so here we had a component for a task, so with some videos as well. The data, this was an electrophysiological study, so we had electrophysiological data, and they are raw and pre-processed. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do in order to make some sense out of electrophysiological data. So, but first we share both the raw and the pre-processed data, some behavioral data, and some pseudonymized demographic information. And then for the analysis, again, we have some scripts. This is again something I would do differently. For example, right now I would recommend people to connect their GitHub account or GitLab account, but in 2017, this is what the best thing that we could do. And this is just an example, just to show you a little bit what you can expect, right? And then you have the manuscript. So here we've just put another copy of the preprint, and here we also uploaded the pre-registration. So you're more than welcome to check the pre-registration, and of course the pre-registration is also on OSF registries. But here there's also another copy and some code that we used on pilot data to verify that the workflow, the pre-processing analysis steps were working. Then there is there's a section with the bibliographic references. So here I've connected my Zotero bibliography for this particular paper. And so what you can see here, for example, is, like, I don't know, if you're interested in knowing something about this particular R package, you can either copy the citation or you can even view the original document. So this is very useful. This is something that so somebody else made me think about recently. Imagine that you have a meta-analysis and you really want to make sure that everybody knows how to access each individual paper that you include in your meta-analysis. Very often you cannot put the PDFs online because they might be copyrighted, okay? Sometimes they might not be open access. So it would be officially, a copyright violation to put it online. But this doesn't apply if they are part of your bibliographic references. And then you can simply go to the original document by clicking this button. Then here on the right side, we have a citation tab, and there are several ways in which you can cite it, depending on your field, of course. So if you're a psychologist, very often you would use the APA formatting. And this is a citation of the OSF project, right? So if somebody wants to reuse the data, reuse the code, they would have to cite this, they would have to use this citation according to the license, right? And the license, we saw it earlier, it's this license here, CC BY. So attribution is mandatory. And then the components that we have seen on the left side here, they're just listed again for convenience, and then some tags for discoverability, and then some recent activity that shows, since the beginning since the creation of the project, what has been done by whom. Which is also quite interesting, if you want to know, okay, so this was deleted, this was changed, it's really handy. Okay, so if there are no questions, I can continue, and then what we can do is to create our own project. No questions. Okay, so everything that I've shown you is completely public, so I was not signed in, right? So everything that I showed you, you can see it yourself. But now what I'm going to do is to sign in, because we want to create our own, a new project. So you can do it here on the top right, sign in. And then there are several ways in which you can sign in. So you can use email and password, obviously. You can sign in with ORCID. So you only need to remember your ORCID username and password. Well, record your number and password, and you will be immediately connected to the OSF. Or if your institution has a subscription, for example, we saw Ghent University, and soon it will be the same with Erasmus University, you can sign in by institution, okay? So by a single sign-on. For now, we're just going to keep it simple, and we're going to use username and password. You'll be redirected to the dashboard. My dashboard is a complete mess, as you may imagine, because I keep using it. But like depending on how often you use the Open Science Framework, to be more or less populated. But here, what we care about is to create a new project. So this green button here. So we click, and you can write the title, which I have absolutely no creativity, so I'll just say new project. And then you can decide whether or not to affiliate this new project to any institution that you're affiliated with. In this case, I'm just going to remove everything. The storage location refers to the storage on the Open Science Framework itself. Okay, there will be a distinction that I'll make later on between add-ons that you can connect to the Open Science Framework, and I think already hinted at that earlier, and the storage on the OSF itself. But in case, so the preferred solution for a couple of reasons that I'll go through later is not to use the storage of the on the Open Science Framework. But if you have to, or if you prefer for whatever reason, then if you're based in Europe, it's better to use Germany because of GDPR jurisdiction. But of course, depending on where you are, you can check, for Australia, Canada, or the United States. So there are several locations. We're just going to choose Germany. Then we click on more. We can describe. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what to write. And then if you have a previous OSF project that has the same template that you want to reuse in this particular project, you can choose it here. So here, if I click and I write, for example, yeah, exactly. So this is what I showed, the project that I showed you earlier. Imagine that I want to use the same template that I use in this project. I can simply click here, and then the new project will have the same structure. Of course, there will be no data, but the same structure. So it will save you quite a lot of time when it comes to, sorting, and creating a good structure for your data. But for now, we don't need it, so we're just going to create. And we're just going to go to the project. And there it is. So I'm just going to make it a little bigger. So this is what you have already seen. Of course, it's bare bones. There's not much in it, but the structure should be familiar to you. So the first thing that I would recommend everybody to do is to add contributors. So you click on the contributors tag, and then here you can decide who should be your contributor. So you can add, you click in this button, and then I'm just gonna say, I know that Joanna is in the, yeah, exactly. So I know Joanna is on the OSF. We already have a project in common, so it was easy for me to find her. So I will add her as a contributor. I click on the plus here, and then already here I have a couple of things that I can decide. So first of all, should she be a bibliographic contributor or not? Sometimes people consider, like, for example, project managers or research assistants as not being part of the bibliographic contributors list. I have opinions on that. I think everybody who works on a project should be part of the bibliographic contributors, but I understand that these things change and they're also dependent on the field. But in this case, since it's my world, Joanna will be part of the bibliographic contributors. And then Joanna can also have different kinds of permissions. She can only be allowed to read or read and write, which is, I would say, most of the time what you would use for your collaborators, or even an administrator. Okay, so with higher privileges, for example, deleting the whole project. I would say read and write is fine, even if you have, if you have like one administrator, usually it's fine. It's better to have two, obviously, in case something goes wrong. But most of the times, one or two administrators, and then read and write, people with read and write permissions are fine. So we add, and what's going to happen is that, yeah, she will be there. Okay, so now her name is here, and with all the settings that we decided earlier. And then what I can also do is to drag and drop her name and decide that this will change the bibliographic contributorship in the final citation. So right now, I will be second author and Joanna will be first author. And I can save the changes. Yes, I saved the changes, so I know for sure that everything is saved. We are still on this page because I would like to show you also something else that is quite interesting, which is view-only links. So view-only links are, yeah, as you can see also from the description, they are links that you can share with people who are not supposed to be able to modify anything, right? And this could be, for example, reviewers, or like external collaborators or external people who were not really collaborators, but like they might want to access some information that is in your project. And these view-only links can also be anonymized. So let's try and create one of them. You can add a link name. So I'll say like a peer review. So this will be part of the hyperlink that will be generated later. And then you can anonymize the contributor list. So if I click here, the link will not display. So what will be displayed in the when you click on the link will be anonymized. Of course, it depends on what you put on what you share, right, with these people, because if there is some identifying information in the documents that you share, obviously that will defy the purpose of anonymization. But with this, what I want to say is that if you are careful with what you share, for example, with reviewers, with editors, this can work very well for peer review. And then, of course, here you can also decide whether you want to share the whole project, so the big box that I talked about before, or smaller subcomponents within the project. For example, if a reviewer asks to see your code, maybe you can share only the subcomponent that contains the code, and so on. So for now, I'm just going to create a link. And this should work exactly. So what you have here is link. Okay, so you can copy, and it will be copied to the clipboard, which components you are sharing, when you created it, who created it, and whether it's anonymized or not. Good. So we have done quite a lot. Any questions? No questions. Okay. So we go back to the main page. And another thing that you will do all the time is to add a component. So now we only have one big box, but you might not want to put everything in one box. You might want to have separate boxes. Or maybe more generally, what I should say is that you might want to have a structure that allows people to better understand what is where. And you can do it in two ways. One is adding a component, but you can also add subfolders within a component. I'm going to show you both. So the first thing that we want to do is to add the component. So I click here on the right side in the components section. You see add component. So I can click here, and then I can say data. This doesn't matter. Then we can decide whether or not to put affiliations. The storage location can also be different. You can decide whether to add contributors from the same, so from the what is called like the parent or like the project, yeah, the big box. So usually that's what happens, you know, like if people are involved in a project, they're usually involved in many stages of the project, so it's better to give them contributorship roles at all times. But again, this depends. The point that I want to make here is that the system is flexible enough that allows you to make this distinction. But for now, Joanna will also involved in the data subcomponent. And then in case we want to add tags, in case we added tags in the main project, then we can transfer them as well. Now we have not added any tags, so this is really inconsequential. Now, as you can see here, this component will inherit the same license as new project. We haven't added a license yet. I'm going to show you later. And then I'm going to show you that once we add a license on the new project, because this component is inside the main project, it will inherit the license. And then if you click on more, you can have another description. And of course, it's, the more detailed, the better. And then you can also decide whether to use some categorization. So for example, we know that we're going to put data here. So we're just going to put the data category, the data label. So we create. And now I want to keep working here because I want to show you what happens when the page refreshes. The page is refreshing, and now you have here a subcomponent or a component that is called data. Okay, so that's what we have done. Now let's go here and add a license. As I said earlier, adding a license is extremely important. The OSF makes it very easy for you to add a license. So if you click on add a license, you have a drop-down menu with the most common permissive licenses that are used, in research and in academic settings and beyond, I would say, because there's also, something related to code sharing, for example. So here, just to give an example, you can license content under CC0, which is, like universal license, like everybody can do anything with the information in this project, and they don't even need to cite the source. This is a good license, an important license, but very often this is not the license that researchers use. Very often, like researchers would like to be acknowledged for the work they do, especially when it comes to the curation of data, code, and so on. So CC BY attribution is the preferred license, which once again is quite permissive. It allows people to share, reuse, and modify the content within the project, but it requires people to cite the source. This works for content in general. For code, there are some licenses that are a bit more specific. And for example, something similar to the CC BY for content, but in this case for code, is the MIT license. There are many other options, or you can also add your own. You can even put your own text in there if you feel so inclined. But I would say that in the overwhelming majority of situations, these options will be more than enough. So let's say that now we want to add the CC BY attribution. I click here, and you see that the content, the text of the license is automatically populated. So we don't need to do much with it. We just have to do save. Of course, you're more than welcome to read it. But like if you are satisfied with what you see, you click on save, and the license has been updated successfully. License CC BY attribution done. Now let's see if the component that we have created inside the project has inherited the license. So we click on data, and look, the license has been updated. But this also means that you can add different licenses to different components. So imagine that, for example, you consider, well, very often data are considered facts, so there's not really copyright that can be claimed. So imagine in this particular situation, in this particular subcomponent, you have data. You can decide to put a CC0 license. Okay, and then save it, and then you would have two different licenses, one for the main project. So everything that will be included in the main project will have that license, but this component will have a different license. Okay. Now, what I guess you'll be interested in is to upload some content. So let's see. Unless there are some questions. No questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. Okay, so then what I can show you is how to, well, the first thing that I can show you is how to create a folder. So as I said, there are two ways of sorting your files in a way that is more readable and more understandable. One way is to have, for example, in the example that we're using, a data component. But inside you can have, for example, a subcomponent that says like EEG raw, as we saw in my example earlier. And so here, that you will only find electrophysiological data, the raw version. So as soon as they come out of the recording device, the amplifier. So let's say I will add another one. I'll create another folder and say behavior, and then we're going to add something in the behavior subfolder. There are two ways to do it. One is to click on upload. Another one is by drag and drop. So I have here some data that I have in a CSV, as a CSV file. So I'll just drag and drop in behavior. And there we go, done. So we can click here to have an idea of what happened. And so what you can see is that some files, especially when they are open formats, can already be visualized in the browser. Okay, so the Open Science Framework already has some functions in place to make sure that you at least can have an overview of what's in some of the files. This is an easy file, like just a toy example. But you can already, like if you don't want to download it, there are some file formats that already they can already be browsed and explored. And for example, you can see here that you can delete it. Well, I can because I'm an administrator, download, and so on. You can also edit, again, depending on the file, you can edit sometimes. Now, what is interesting here is this version. What does it mean? Well, the Open Science Framework has built-in version control. The way I usually explain version control to somebody who's never used it is like a sort of time machine. For usually, like it's very common for code, but it can also be used for documents. And for example, Google Drive has it. And another example is the Open Science Framework. So let's see how it works. So let's go back to the data component. And imagine that now we have a specific version of this file online on the OSF, but I still have a version here on my computer. So why don't we modify the one that I have on my computer? I don't think you can see it. So now you should be able to see it. Yes. So let's say that now I want to add a row. Okay, so it's going to be the same thing, but in this case, it's going to be 100. It makes no sense. Oops. There we go. Okay, so now we're looking for a 26th row that has 100. And this is the local copy. Okay, so I'm gonna close. I'm gonna obviously save. So now my local copy, it has one row, an additional row compared to the online copy. I'm just gonna drag and drop. Okay, again in behavior as we did earlier. Done. Oh, error. Okay, let's refresh. Maybe it was a temporary problem. Yeah, exactly. Or maybe it did it already. I don't know. And we're going to check now. I don't know why I see this error. Okay, so keep in mind that the file has the same name. Okay, so I haven't changed the name. I've only added some information in the file itself. So if I click there again, yeah, it didn't do it. That's strange. Well, let's go back, and this time we do it. Sometimes it happens. It's very rare, but it happens. So let's say I want to do data. In this case, I'm using the upload function. In this case, it worked. Sometimes drag and drop is a bit iffy. So let's look at the version. Look at this. Look at the version. Now it has changed. And if I look at the end of the file, I'll be able to see this 100 that I just added. That's perfect. But the cool thing is that people can look at different versions of the same file, and they can see information, for example, on when it was modified, the user who modified it, whether it was downloaded. You can download it immediately, so you can also check the different versions locally. So you can download both versions and decide which one, which one is best or most appropriate. And it has also some unique information, unique identifier in a way that is used for file naming, so that you are entirely sure that these two files are not the same, and you can see the difference here. So, for example, this SHA2 code is different. Okay. Good. So we have version control, and then at some point you can decide, oh, the version that I had previously is a better version for whatever reason, and so you can keep that one. Let's go back to data. Okay. The last thing that I would like to show, and then maybe we can have a bit of a break, because I don't want people to be super tired. I would like to show you how the wiki works, because very often, it is good practice to have documentation related to code, related to data, so that not only machines but also humans can understand what kind of information you are sharing, and it will be easier to to reuse, for example, or to explore for verification purposes. So having a documentation is very important. A documentation file is very important. You can either have a README file and you can simply upload it, as we have seen before. That's perfectly fine. But the OSF allows you to use a wiki. So if we click on this little arrow, this icon here, you will see, yes, the wiki. So here on the, in the center, there is a view. So let's say this is the wiki, and then you see that I'm editing on the right side, and then you view immediately in the middle what it looks like. This wiki works using the Markdown formatting. Some people might be familiar with this, but it's a way of writing text that it's a way of formatting text. For example, if I want to write something in italics, I can simply add at the beginning and at the end of the thing that I want to format in italics an asterisk. If I want to put it in bold, I put 2 asterisks at the beginning and at the end. And you see that it changes automatically here in the view. If I want to add a link, I do it like this. Okay, and you see that it's changed already. This has become blue, and this has become a link, a hyperlink. So if I click here, it will be redirected to the OSF. Now, you don't need to know Markdown in order to create a wiki, right? So you can just write text and it's going to be perfectly fine. Or you can see, for example, like teach me how to format in bold. So what you can do, you can highlight the information that you want to change, and you can use these icons here. So if you click here on the bold icon, you will see that this will change, so that basically you will learn how to create something, how to format something in bold in Markdown. But then simultaneously it will change here. So you don't need to know all these things. You know, if you want to create a hyperlink, or if you want to quote, you know, like you see, like you don't need to know everything in order to be able to use the full functionalities of the wiki and the full formatting of the wiki. But it's, you know, it's a good teaching tool also if you want to learn Markdown. Okay, so we have something like this. Usually you would write something that is informative, not this gibberish that I just wrote. And then we save here in the bottom. And then this has been saved. So this is the first version of the wiki, right? So if we go back to the data component, you will see that the wiki now is populated with the things that we wrote. Okay, so imagine that we want to change the wiki. So like right now, this is really insufficient. It doesn't have enough information. We can do exactly the same that we did before. We click on this little arrow. We go on edit this time, because now we have a first version. So we have to edit the first version. We click on edit, and then we say add line. Okay, and we just make it like super unmissable. Okay, so it's become a title. And so if I click on save, then what you will have is then 2 versions of the wiki. And you can see the wiki version here on the top right. So the current version is the latest version, but if you click here, you will see the previous version, which should not have the last line. And if I click there, it disappears. Okay, so once again, you have version control built in, not only for data, but also for the wiki. Okay, now I think we can have a 10-minute break. That's okay, or even a 5-minute break for you. What would you think, Eirini?
For me, it's fine. I don't know what Marlies and Alex would like, if they need more time or no break. I don't know.
For me, it's fine. 5 minutes or no break. It's both is fine.
Okay. Also, no break is fine.
Yeah, I'm really into it, but I don't know
Okay.
the other participants.
It's not going to take that much longer, so I think we can finish.
I'm fine with that.
Me too.
Okay, but then if there are no further objections, I can continue. Okay, so okay, all right. So what I can show you now, well, one thing that I would like to mention when it comes to data storage, which is something that people might be interested in, is that so for, as far as I can remember, for private projects, the maximum number of the maximum storage is 5 gigabytes, and for public projects, the maximum storage is 50 gigabytes. It used to be unlimited, but then what we all need to understand is that the open science is developed by a non-profit organization. They don't have their own servers. The Center for Open Science doesn't have their own servers, so they use, usually, as far as I can remember, they use Google servers, and they're renting Google servers, and the price increases over time. So at some point they had to put a limit on, a cap on the file storage, maximum file storage. I think this is another reason why it would be better to use add-ons, to use other services that, for example, your institution already has agreements with, and then connect them to the Open Science Framework. And I'm going to show you how to do it right now. So we are now, let's not forget, we are in the data subcomponent, okay? Now we can go to add-ons. And here you have a list of add-ons that can be connected to the Open Science Framework. You can see, for example, as I mentioned earlier, something that is related more to code, for example, Bitbucket, or like some file hosting services, for example, Dataverse, Dropbox, Figshare. But you see, GitHub. You can also see Google Drive, for example. And as I showed you earlier, you can have, like, for example, your Zotero library connected as well. So now we keep it simple, very simple, and we're going to Google Drive. Okay, we're just gonna connect Google Drive. So we're just gonna click on Enable, and every time you click on a service on anywhere, on any enable that you see, you will be shown these terms, okay, which basically tell you what happens when you do something. Okay, so it gives a better idea of how these two services, the OSF and the service that you want to connect to the OSF, interact with each other. For example, in this case, if we look at view download file versions, Google Drive files and their versions can be viewed and downloaded via the OSF. It's not always like that. Sometimes there is a file versioning on the service itself that cannot be transferred to the OSF. Okay, so what I recommend is always to read this, just to make sure, for example, that whatever you delete on one service, whether or not it will be deleted on the OSF as well, like just to make sure that you know what is happening when you're connecting these two services. But it's usually quite clear. In this case, we decide that we want to confirm. If you do it the first time, you'll be redirected, of course, to Google Drive in this case, or to your service, the service that you want to connect, because you will have to provide authorization. So you will have to tell the service that the OSF is authorized to look into the content that you have on your account. I've already done it, as you may imagine, so I cannot show you this, but it's very simple. You just have to provide authorization by saying, yes, I authorize. So now that we have imported, so now we have said, okay, I want to use this add-on. I want to import the account from profile. So I click here. I'll be asked, are you sure? I will say, yes, I am sure. And then you will be greeted with all the many things that you have on the service. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to do something super simple, and I am going to share the slides that I've shown earlier. Okay, so I have a subfolder on Google Drive that with the slides. So I click on Save. This has been saved. So if I go back on Data, Now you will see that there is the OSF storage that we have used before, but there is also Google Drive with the slides that I've shown you at the beginning of this presentation. You don't need to use only exclusively one service. For example, you can go again on Add-on and decide that you want to share something that you have on GitHub, for example. Again, you see that, for example, logs now are in green because there is a different way in which the OSF and GitHub share logs, information about logs. We're not going into the details here. We're just going to click confirm. And now you have two services. Okay, so I want to import the account from profile. I agree. And then I should be able to see exactly all the repositories. Okay, public and private. Okay, so for example, this is my README, my introduction page when you go on my GitHub account. So I click on save, settings updated, I go back to data. And what I see is that now I have GitHub as well, okay? And then whatever I have inside that particular repository. So what is interesting is that you can change stuff on GitHub and it will be automatically synchronized here on the OSF. So you don't have to copy paste stuff several times. It's all seamlessly integrated. On the other hand, if you upload something on the OSF storage servers, well, then you have to keep an eye on what you have uploaded. So I would say even for convenience, it's better to add add-ons. Good. So I should also, well, one thing that I would like to remind everybody is that, like now we have seen only one component within the main project, but you can actually have as many components as you want. It depends on how you want to sort sort your data. Because in some situations, it might be better to use a folder. In some other situations, it's better to use a component. Just for you to know, when a project is public, it can be assigned a digital object identifier. And the cool thing is that you can give different DOIs to different components. So maybe it would be a good idea to have a big component that includes the data, and then subfolders that have, for example, I don't know, behavioral and electrophysiological data, just to give you an example. But then if somebody wants to use your data, they can use the DOI associated with the data component. If they want to use the code, they will associate, they will use the DOI associated with the code component, and so on. So you might want to think about this before you start putting stuff on the OSF. Okay. Another thing that I would like to show you, which is also quite fun. So now we go back to the main project. Okay, so which means that we will also be able to see exactly the data component with all the add-ons associated, Google Drive and GitHub. What you can do is also to chat with your collaborators. For example, if I wanted to communicate with Joanna, I could tag her, you see, so automatically if you use the symbol, you will know who is among the collaborators that you can contact. And I can say, hello. I'm not going to do it because Joanna is not here anymore and I don't want to scare her, but she will get an email saying that somebody has started a conversation. And it's very useful. And, you can start very long conversations that can be really useful to comment on the project. So let's say I'm just gonna write here. I'm just gonna show you that you can edit the message. You can reply to the message, or you can delete the message. Now, what is important to know is that all the, every discussion that is included here will be made public if the project is public. Just, just a reminder not to be nasty with anyone. Okay. Then once you are happy with how the project looks, and like you've got all the right permissions, you've got everything set in place, you can decide to make a project public. You can click on the make public, because as you have seen, we have always been in private mode. This is the default. But if you want to make it public, you just click here, and then there will be a warning that says, like just make sure that everything is in order. It is possible, even when something is public, to change it later on. But once something is on the internet, assume that it's going to be there forever. So just make sure that, for example, if you are sharing data, that they're properly pseudonymized or anonymized. This is a very important thing. And ideally you would partner up with data stewards or somebody else at the university or in your institution that can help you figure out this kind of important information. Anyway, so if I click on continue, this will become public. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to pollute the whole place with all my new projects. So I'll just click X. But this is just to give you an idea of how it works. So I think I've said everything that I wanted to say. Of course, there's much more, right? So I've just, I think I've given you a basic idea of how the OSF works for the most common use cases. But obviously, there's much more. So I really encourage you to look into the official guides. To talk to people at the Center for Open Science in case you want to have additional information. Follow webinars from the Center for Open Science, and but more generally, start using it, because you will see that it becomes a really intuitive way to share either only with your collaborators or more publicly the fruit of your labor. So I'm just gonna stop sharing and thank everybody for being here. Thank you for the virtual applause.
Thank you.
I've never explored the OSF like that, but it's so easy and so organized. I really like it.
Yeah. I mean, of course, like no service is perfect, but I would say that, as I said earlier, the software engineers are very responsive. So just to give you an idea, like a few weeks ago, I noticed that one feature that I usually used disappeared. So if you have several components, you can decide to drag and drop them so that, for example, data will be seen before code, for example. And that thing disappeared. That feature disappeared at some point. And I was like, I just can't deal with this. Like, it's just too much for me. So, and it was such a small thing, but I sent an email to the Center for Open Science and I said, is there I noticed this, is there a possibility to reintegrate it, or is there a reason why it's not there? I just asked. I didn't really mean like, oh my God, what's happening to my favorite? And after a few days, so they were very responsive, and they said, this was out of production, but we're reconsidering whether to add it or not. And a few days later, they sent me an email saying, oh, don't worry, we have added it again because we saw that it could be useful for people. We didn't know it was useful for people, so now it's back in there. And I'm like, wow, I feel important just because I asked the question. So I think that's maybe this ties in with the sense of community that I also mentioned earlier. They really, that's my impression. They care. They want to make sure that the product is user friendly and it's used in a way that researchers can really use.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I say if there are no further questions, we can we can close a bit earlier. Huh?
I dropped in at the last sentence, I think. So,
don't worry.
but I know the OSF part, and I'm looking forward to it. You recorded this to make the recording available for others? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Antonio, I had two questions. Most questions you answered immediately after I thought like, oh, but I wonder, and then you just answered it and it showed. For example, the licenses, I thought it was really, because I was wondering, well, do you then have like a description, and then the description right away after you clicked, it's like, okay, yes, you have. Yeah. So that's also what I really liked about the system. One question is like the add-ons you put in there, is it automatically synced? And do you know how often it's synced?
How often? No, I can't tell you. I guess it also depends on the service. So maybe some services synchronize more quickly than others or more often than others. This is a technical question that I can't really answer. But I usually see that syncing happens relatively quickly. So for example, when I create slides on Google Slides, and then I change something on Google Slides, and then I look at the OSF, it's already changed, right? So it's a matter of seconds. But that's because they're slides. Maybe with something bigger, it will not be like that.
Yeah, because then I can also imagine that if you put an add-on, it can be really useful, but also it's really be aware that you not add something to the different folder and then have something public. That's
absolutely yes.
Yeah.
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 No, I just want to say that, like, I think the fact that there is this synchronization actually makes it easier because you only have to monitor one service. And usually I would say monitor the add-on. So you put everything on the add-on so that you know for sure or should know for sure what is and is not there. And then everything will just be mirrored and synchronized on the OSF.
Yeah. And the other one was, you told in the beginning that when it's blue, it's a link. So the contributors are, I saw, of course, all blue because they're part of it. Is it also possible to add a contributor that's not part of the OSF framework? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I didn't show you, but the name will be in black. So you can add, so maybe I can share the screen again. Let me share the screen again. Because this is a very interesting. So now you should be able to see my screen again.
Mm-hmm.
If I click on contributors, and let's say add. Do you know somebody who's? Are you on the OSF?
I'm not on the OSF. So
okay,
OSF, you can set me.
So I put your name here and I search. No results found. Okay, mm-hmm. So it's possible that the research is, that the search is not good, or it's possible that you are not registered. I can add you, and I can say, well, maybe if I can also use. I can send you an email. I'm not going to do it now because we're going to record this and we don't need to spam you with information. But I can say, so you will be notified. The system will send you an email. You will be notified. The system will say, the message will say, you have been added to an OSF project. And then, of course, if I click add, your name will be in the list. So you will be in the list here together with myself and Joanna. So you will still be able to, so I will still, as an administrator, I can decide what kind of permissions you have, whether you can be a bibliographic contributor. I can reorder you, just like a regular OSF registered OSF user. The point is that, of course, you will not have your own page, and then over time, like you might be linked to several projects, and so you might find it more useful to become, to register. And then when that happens, you register with the same email that people have used to invite you. All the projects that you are involved in will be automatically connected to your profile.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you also for the presentation, because I thought it was really useful to see.
Glad to
and I'm a bit jealous because I thought like, oh God, this team also was that organized.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but then if there, yes, you have any questions?
No, I don't know. Not on the. I shouldn't be phrasing my question now. No, I know a bit about OSF, but yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Eirini, what do you say? Shall we close?
Yeah, I think, yeah, and you know, if people watch this video and they have questions, they can, of course, add questions below, either in the comments, or they can send us an email or anything like that.
Absolutely, yes. So thank you for organizing this.